Yeah, there's sort of an interaction between the Earth and the location of it and the crop circles. The whole thing is kind of like a system. And even the human circle makers, when they make these circles, they're not just looking at the field abstractly, like you would from a grid. They're actually looking at the surrounding mountains and the trees and the star formations and all sorts of things. So the circles, the human-made ones, are kind of placed very carefully that way. And it has something to do with the energy of the Earth, kind of feng shui, this kind of alignment of energy. And so in some sense, you could see that the Earth itself is kind of helping to place where the circles show up. And, I used to think maybe that the crop circles were some sort of Earth acupuncture or something. They're kind of stimulating certain points on the grid. I don't think you can discount that because, honestly, there's a lot we don't know about this phenomena. And whether it's, more ET-made or human-made, to me, it's not really the question. Like I've said in the past, to me, they're all real because they all have this really, a lot of them have this really interesting energy phenomena around them. I mean, any crop circle that can destroy my batteries in 5 seconds is real. This is the bottom line, no matter who makes it. And if you look at some of the original ones, like the Tully saucer nest, and people I've spoken to that have seen structured disks near where circles were found later, some of those are actually a lot messier than the ones that humans make. So in some sense, humans have improved on the way they look, and perhaps that's a feature of the precision of the geometry which gives it, the circle its power. So
have your batteries died in some formations?
Oh, yeah, many times. I think actually Lex posted a link up to the pictures that I've taken.
There they are.
It has happened, George, so many times when we've been over there on our tour starting back in 1997. Almost every summer I've been in England since 1997. I have been there when either my own camera has malfunctioned, somebody else's camera. The first one where it happened to me was 1999, the Devil's Den formation, and you can see the picture there of someone's GPS device where the batteries were totally new and they were just gone in seconds. A fellow came in before me, his video camera died, and then my static meter, which I've used to measure the static charges, it was completely gone in about 3 or 4 seconds, brand new batteries. So I've seen it happen many times. And I'll tell you something, we were filmed this summer by the National Geographic Channel for an upcoming documentary about next year. We're over by Silbury Hill. And we're doing the interview, and in the middle of it, they tell me, you know what? Our really expensive Betacam died about 2 weeks ago in this same circle.
It's amazing.
The batteries died, and the camera was so frozen up, they had to call London for instructions how to restart it because these instructions have to be written like the flash ROM in it or something like this. And they didn't even know how to restart it. And we've seen that so many times. So I said to them, so now you see what we're talking about. And they said, yes, they were actually much more open-minded.
How far back do crop circles go in recorded history?
They seem to go at least back to the 1600s, with the reports of the mowing devil. I think that was from 1678 or so in Hertfordshire in England. If they go back to the Dark Ages and before that, we don't really know. But there are reports, in the Old Testament, Dead Sea Scrolls, about strange markings in the field. We know, the Native Americans here in America talked about fairy circles and things like that. So they do seem to go back at least a few hundred years, if not, longer than that.
All around this planet or primarily in England?
If they are happening all around the planet, it's just that England is such a smaller place in the U.S., for example, that it's a lot easier to find them. And most of them in England happen within, an area around Avebury and Stonehenge, so they're a lot easier to find from pilots flying overhead. It seems we might get as many in the U.S. It's just they're so spread out that if the farmer finds one, he may not know what it is, and maybe no one will even fly over it, so they'll never be discovered. And if they're happening in places like China, or India, we may not find out about them. So it's really hard to say without a, real scientific survey to know exactly the percentages. But certainly England does get a lot of them, no doubt about it.
If they come from non-human sources, Simeon, then one has to try to figure out, why are they in these geometric patterns? What are they trying to tell us? Is it a code? Why can't they make it more obvious? Why can't they simply spell things out? If it knows we speak English, spell it out in English in the crop formation. Why the codes? Why the formations the way they're made?
We kind of assume that things that show up on Earth are going to be something that we can fit into our three-dimensional boxes.
Right.
And I got to tell you, I try to wrap my mind around this phenomena all the time, and over 10 years I haven't been able to do it yet. It really doesn't fit into a 3D box. It's really a multi-dimensional process. And I think what the shapes are really telling us is something about the language of resonance. I really think if there's some sort of extraterrestrial communication going on here, if that's where it started, several decades ago, it's really trying to show us that there's a language of shape and geometry, and if you get exactly the right resonance, the crop can become almost like a musical instrument or a generator of energy. In other words, if the pattern is just done precisely enough, it sort of ignites a certain organization of the wheat. Energy starts to flow in ways that is not ordinary, not typical. And it's actually showing us something about how shape and geometry interacts with energy, which could have very important consequences for our ability, to tap into new energy sources and so forth. Basically, instead of using this kind of explosive, external, forceful technology built on combustion fuels, we could be using shape and resonance to kind of generate energy, internally, like people have come on the show many times in the past, talk about the vacuum stage
Sure.
and free energy and so forth. So it seems to me that the whole process is leading us in that direction to think about that and to talk about that. Are there other dimensions and aspects of our environment that we've taken for granted and never tapped into before? And the crop circles really seem to, activate that, because the bottom line is they're just plain weird. I mean, the shapes can be very organized, but the experiences you have in and around them are very strange and very hard to explain. And what that's showing you is there's something you don't understand about how wheat and grain crops work when they're organized in a pattern instead of being, set up in a very uniform way, the way they're usually planted by a seed planter.
And the shapes, the patterns seem to be getting more sophisticated. At least that's my assumption.
Yeah, they do. I mean, some of them to me almost look like machines now, like some sort of advanced technology. There have been a lot of Mayan patterns, Aztec patterns, and some of the circle makers once told me they thought of circles as natural magic. It's somewhere between magic and something that's just natural. And to me, it's kind of like a natural type of technology, because you take all these stalks of grain, you organize them in a very precise pattern, and it becomes almost technological, like kind of getting there to that edge. And it starts interacting with your own technology in ways that you may not want to happen. You can see from the photos, that Lex is linked to, that a lot of the time the cameras won't work anymore. I mean, the pictures you can see there, like, for example, Colin Andrews had one of his cameras completely stop working in the Martin Cell Formation. He was kind of leading us around, explaining to us how you look at it and look for patterns and so forth. And the screen stopped working. There's another picture of a camera that is never going to work again with a very strange star-like constellation pattern in the screen. Just happened very suddenly by Silbury Hill. So, it's going to interact with your technology in a way that is very unexplainable, but again, not completely unlike a lot of advances right now in material sciences, things like superconductivity, metamaterials, photonic crystals, and plasmonics. I mean, there's a lot of areas that even material scientists right now can't agree how they work and how the processes are happening. So it's something like that. It's right at the edge of science, at least the way I look at it.
Do you, when you fly over them, are you in awe at how they look?
They look spectacular from the air. There's no doubt about it. And that's why if you go over to England, you'll see a lot of people getting on ultralights and taking helicopter rides. And there are just a ton of helicopters and planes over these. I mean, sometimes when you're in the circles, the air is just thick with, aeronautical vehicles taking pictures because they look fantastic from the air. It gives you a whole appreciation of the landscape because they're placed in a certain way. They're really, they reflect light in very interesting ways. And they just all around look a lot better up there. You can just see the whole pattern, and it just makes sense. Yep.
Do the farmers get upset?
Some of the farmers do get upset. Some of them have accepted it. The bottom line is there was a study done recently that I think it showed that about 8 million pounds comes into the area every summer from crop tourism. And if you work it out, that's about $150,000 per circle. So there's a lot of income coming in from it, and that also benefits the region.
It's a little bit more than a barrel of wheat, I'll tell you that. We'll be back in a moment. We'll talk about the UFO connection with crop circles and also under a microscope. How does a grain of wheat look like from a crop formation? Simeon, under a microscope, the grain of wheat, does it look different in some cases where one might say, maybe it came from other sources other than man-made?
You mean the wheat itself? Whether you can actually tell the difference in the formation by the way the wheat looks under a microscope?
Is that conceivable? Can you?
Here's the deal. We used to think we had a litmus test for telling the difference between the man-made ones, and the so-called real ones, as we used to refer to it. There were a lot of tests we had. One of them, for example, was whether there's like bloom on the stalks. It's